Even if any of these platforms let me down, there's still readers out there. You can still reach them. It's important to find a place where you can keep your readers. You can usher your readers into a safe space where you can talk to them. So it's not just Amazon followers. It's like I want a space that's mine, that I own. I don't have to worry that I'm going to get banned from my own website. So um, having that space where you can sell your books, where you can talk to your readers, I think that to me was the biggest lesson.
Do you love science fiction and fantasy books? You found yourself in the right dimension. Welcome to the greatest podcast in the multiverse, where each week I talk to science fiction and fantasy authors about myth, magic, and the infinite possibilities of storytelling. I'm your host, Herman Stuernagel, and I'll be taking you on a journey with some of your favorite authors, helping you to get to know them and possibly uncover some new literary gems along the way. Ready to explore? Because on this show, every conversation is a doorway into a different world. So welcome once again to the greatest podcast in the multiverse. I'm super excited to have a very special guest with me today, Scott Palmer.
How's it going, Herman?
It's going great, Scott. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing excellent. Got my coffee.
Yeah, we're recording pretty early, earlier than I normally record, so I've got a coffee here as well. So
Well, you're 3 hours earlier than me. So
yeah, we're 6 in the morning here.
And somehow I still look more tired than you.
It's the hair. You've got enough hair to have the bedhead going. I don't have that much hair, so
that could be it. Yeah.
It's all good. Cool. So Scott's a debut author. He's also a member of the Break-Ins. Scott, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you and your writing journey, though.
Okay, yeah. Let's just start at the beginning. I mean, I've said it before. I've been pretty open. I think this isn't actually the first book that I wrote, even though it's the first book that I'm publishing. I have a couple clunkers, a couple stinkers stinking up my hard drive.
Okay.
And I really wanted to, when it came to writing, the writing journey for me, the destination wasn't necessarily just getting published. The destination was writing a good book. So it took whatever paths it needed to get to that point. And I'm a big reader myself, so I was able to hold myself to a very high standard, probably higher than anyone else would. And I was just like, I'm going to keep going until I write something that I'm comfortable to put on my bookshelf here beside my other books. I didn't want to just be like, okay, here we go. Like I was going to really, really work my butt off to make something that was like big. And this kind of, I think, stems from, I have a past in music. I first pursued music, and I think that there was a lot of settling in those days, just because I was young and excited and wanted to get something out, right? So I totally understand that when you're a young creative, you need some social proof. You need some, look, I told you I was good. This is what I've been doing all this time in my bedroom alone.
Yeah.
And so I think it really stems from really needing that, not just to release something, but like I said, to really put the effort in and see what would happen if I did all the things that I kind of maybe rushed in the past, and I took my time on and did every step of the way. What could I produce? So that for me, the writing journey included just diving in, writing some crappy drafts, writing some short stories, writing some poems, writing novellas, writing a novel, finishing that novel, reading the novel, realizing this novel sucks. This is not good. Trying again, getting about 80% on another novel and realizing I went in a straight line and never started to come back. And this novel was, again, I wasted another 6 months writing a clunker. So at that point, I sought some professional help. I hired a book coach, which is, I know there's a lot of stigma around book coaches because they do, I mean, I shouldn't say they, because it's not all of them, obviously, but it is, some of them have a reputation for kind of like vanity presses, for kind of, to lack of a better term, preying on young writers who are, trying to maybe not really know what they want from their writing. I was lucky enough that I really did know. So when I hired this book coach, I was able to, vet a few different ones. And I got one who I thought was good for me. And basically what he did for me was teach me the ins and outs of writing. I had read all of the craft books. probably the popular ones that everyone reads, like On Writing and Save the Cat and
Right.
Bird by Bird and all those good ones. And they really resonated with me and they gave me a lot of information, but there was still something that I wasn't quite grasping, I think.
Hmm.
Um, and I think what it was probably lack of practice and lack of vision. Like I
Okay.
didn't exactly know what a book should be or what I really wanted it to be. Um, I'm sure, like a lot of young writers, like I'm sure you yourself, Herman, you went through your stage of imitation, where you were
Right.
imitating your favorite writers. So
Hmm.
your voice wasn't really your voice yet. It was kind of a
Right.
hodgepodge of. It was kind of a stew of all the names, but it hadn't simmered yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
You got to
Yeah.
get all those names getting in. You got to read widely, let all of those authors simmer in your mind, and then after years of that, you start to develop your own voice. But at this point, I was still very Joe Abercrombie, very George R. R. Martin, very Neil Gaiman. You could almost pick the points out in the book where I was reading. Oh, I clearly read American Gods during that point.
Right. Yes.
So what the writing coach did was allow me to grow my own voice and really kind of understand, look at writing in a different way. Um,
Hmm.
where like you can look at it in a craft point, right? Where you can really just if you want to compare it to say construction, if you're a carpenter, right? You've just got to learn you got to learn the ins and outs of the wood. You've got to learn the ins and outs of your tools. And I really think it's the same thing. There's some natural ability. Like I really want to become a writer. I really want to become a carpenter. But when it comes down to it, there's a lot of natural, you know, just different things that you need to pick up along the way. Different things
Yeah.
that you're not going to learn unless you just get in there and get dirty. So the writing coach allowed me to make mistakes and to, keep rolling on with just instead of writing a couple chapters, being like, I don't like these, go back. He
Yeah.
let me keep rolling and
Okay.
trust myself that, okay, I'm going to come back for more edits. I'm going to come back for more, more drafts of this. Where again, when you're a young writer, you're writing this thing. It's taking you so long to write that first draft. It's really hard to imagine coming back to it.
Yes.
You know,
Right.
like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to come back to this. Like, it's taking me a lot to just finish this, right?
For sure. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
I. Sorry.
sorry,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, Armin.
No, I was gonna say, and for me, like, I mean, for every month of drafting, I'm spending probably three editing. So,
I
like, it's
I
definitely
do
not
the
the end,
same.
right?
I'm a
Yeah.
heavy editor. Um, I find like the magic comes out in the editing. You can get
Definitely.
like the bones is really good. You need that plot, you need that structure. But once you have something to build on, that's when I really add in, like especially when it comes to character work and
Hmm.
foreshadowing, and
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
and I love that when I was first learning writing. I used to read these books, especially Game of Thrones, and I would be like, George R. R. Martin is an absolute genius on my reread because I'd be like, he foreshadowed everything.
Right.
He knew everything. But now that I'm like further along in my own writing journey, I still think George is a genius. Don't get me wrong. But I
Right.
totally understand that, okay, he's more human genius, right? Because he's just applying these skills, these craft skills at a very high level. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I can
Exactly.
see
Yeah.
that this is a skill that you can learn. He's just a master at it. But it seems
Definitely.
so far, it used to be magic, right? But now it's more like, okay, you can actually put the work in and become a wizard, just like George,
Yeah.
or just like your favorite authors, right?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. You've peeked behind the curtain a little bit and are able to kind of see how some of that magic happens, right?
That really is what it is, isn't it? It's the wizard
Yeah.
behind the curtain.
Yeah.
You've got to
Definitely.
see
And
that. Oh,
yeah, and someone like George, I mean, he's had decades to refine his craft, right?
yep. So it's with him
Sorry.
too. Like a lot of people, and I didn't know before I started reading those books. Like he's that he I believe he was 30 years along in his career before he started writing that, and he had won multiple Hugo Awards
Hmm.
before Game of Thrones, which is incredible to me. I mean, it shows that he was a master even when he began. So if you can start something that strong, of course you're going to have good bones. And I mean, I know George gets a lot of heat these days, but I am such a believer in that man. I think he is. I just finished my reread of Game of Thrones, the series, this year. This is the third time I've reread it now because I'm just
Okay.
such a fanboy. But I
Yeah.
just finished Dance with Dragons last Friday, and
Hmm.
it blows my mind. I haven't stopped talking about it
Cool.
since. I
That's
was I
great.
was starting to read Wizard of Earthsea right after, and I was like, I can't even read anything else right now. I'm just still thinking about Game of Thrones, all of the different threads, and it's just amazing. Like it just really, and I think actually we were going to talk about inspiration a little bit. I want to just dive right into that.
Well, yeah. Before we get there, though, we'll go back into that.
Okay,
I just
I'm a rusher.
no, it's all okay. You're good. You're talking. You're coming up with a lot of good points here that I just want to touch on a little bit. I do want to talk about just your not being satisfied in putting out your first couple of drafts, which I think is great because I mean I firmly believe as authors we're kind of creating our legacy, right? So I guess I want to talk a bit about what made Memory of Song the one like you went through the process of the story coach. You saw your previous drafts were not quite what you wanted out in the world. What was it that made Memory of Song the one that you were going to publish?
I like that. That's a great question. So what it was really is that it stems, it kind of just what we were talking about, the inspiration. Like I really wanted something. I wanted these books that I loved that I can't get enough of. I wanted to write those. Like I just wanted to find a way to write those books to satisfy these itches that I just can't, satisfy any other way. And the first two books just simply weren't that. They were more single character focused. I was working on different POVs. The one of them was in first person POV,
Okay.
which I just found out it's not for me. I would rather be third person close.
Right.
And I had to write the first book in first person to kind of realize, yeah, I don't really like first person. And that was stemming off inspiration from Name of the Wind.
Okay.
I kind of wrote a little bard and he went on
Yeah.
an adventure. And I might even rework that story one day. It's not a bad story, but it was just the writing was weak in a lot of spots, right?
Okay. Fair. Yeah.
So then after that, like I said, I wanted to write a multi POV story and
Hmm.
something with more close akin to the fantasy books that I love. And it was bad the first time. It was really hard. I didn't understand how. First of all, I didn't actually understand that it took me dissecting Game of Thrones to kind of see that each character is their own story.
Right.
You're just weaving those different stories together, and then
Yeah.
you want them to meet at the end or in the middle. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so
For
I didn't
sure.
really understand that. I was just writing a story, chapter one, chapter two, chapter three, alternating character POVs, not
Hmm.
really knowing where they were going to meet up, not really knowing what I was dealing with the plot.
Yeah.
And then at that point, I was reading just a ton of fantasy. It was actually I've been very open about the inspiration. I was reading Ryan Cahill,
Okay.
and it just seeing, okay, this is a self-published book. This has like a
Mhm.
really big world. This is the great world building that I want, right?
Right. Yeah.
So how do I get this in? Like how can I work this into my own? I had all of the history that I had seen in that book and as well as many other books,
Yeah.
but in seeing it done in with what Ryan did, it felt so much more approachable because I was like, I know that he didn't have like a huge team of editors. I know that this was very a closer leap for me to kind of
For
grasp
sure.
onto. So
Yeah.
as soon as I read that, I was like, I just started researching again. I looked at the fantasy books that I was in love with, Joe Abercrombie, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, even, of course. And I could
Yeah.
then pick out each character had their own story. Each character,
Yes.
each POV character had their own, and from reading Save the Cat and other books on craft, I understood how to do a story. And I was like, oh, this isn't one story. This is five stories that
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
just melding together. So once I had that realization, I had to throw away what I was working on and start fresh.
Okay.
And that's kind
Cool.
of, I guess, the long answer to that. But
Yeah. No, I think that, I mean, that's great. And I think it's good for um, other authors who are starting out to realize that, you don't have to keep that first story. I think,
it's hard to throw away. But
yeah, my first book that I published because I didn't have the restraint that you had in, in doing that evaluation before it was published. Like,
yeah,
I don't think it's a bad story, but I definitely suffered from too many POVs without weaving them back in together. Like
yeah,
you mentioned, like
it's
I
hard.
think that's something that newer authors often do because I was reading Wheel of Time at the time, and you can kind of see, even though it's a science fiction story, you can kind of see that influence in my first book. Um, but it's I was like, oh well, we'll just add another point of view character here, and and I think it
I know. And like I had that problem too, actually. Like the first one, I think I had nine POVs,
hmm,
but I wasn't building them in the way like I needed more time with. I needed a good character arc with each of these characters. And actually, I love that you brought up Wheel of Time because that was actually one of the ones that I was really paying attention to, especially the first three.
Right.
Those character arcs with those three main characters in those first three books are very, very good.
Hmm.
And it's a very good learning trilogy that I call it a trilogy because it kind of works.
Yeah, it
The
works as
opening
a
three
trilogy.
books are
Yeah.
kind of like a bit of a trilogy, right? Because
Yeah.
book four almost starts new with this big scope. But anyways, again, I was learning from those books in the same way and just seeing Rand's journey, Pippin's journey, and then you can just see all of the different characters, and again, just take inspiration, plug into my own story, change everything so it fits with my own lore and my own world. And it was
Yeah.
very, it was a big realization of just kind of like, these are the building blocks. Now I've got the building blocks I need.
Hmm.
Before I was, trying to, if you want to use a good analogy, I was trying to build a house with sand, and I was like,
Yeah. Right.
nothing was sticking. Everything was just crumbling all over. So it was like, I think the biggest step forward was just realizing that these are the building blocks. These are what work in a story. These are what make it compelling. These are the things, more importantly, what I love, right? Because I think some of the best advice I ever got was write what you want to read.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
really what keeps it interesting, isn't it?
Definitely. It is. Yeah. So, you're obviously passionate about story and storytelling. And I just want to, what is your motivation behind storytelling? Why is this something that you're so passionate about and want to continue to do?
I love that. So I was talking with this about my wife last week actually because as you might know, Herman, after you release a book, sometimes it's hard to realize you've just gone through this big thing and now I'm just going to turn around and do it again at the very beginning, right?
Yeah.
Which writing is my passion. It's what I want to do. But the marketing and business side is what kind of weighs you down. So it was like my wife and I were talking. What separates? What is actually like? Why did we get into this? What is the like you said? What is the why in your writing? Why am I doing
Yeah.
this? The writing portion has made me personally a better human.
Hmm.
Um, 2019, my wife and I played in a band for many years, different bands, but 2019 our bands kind of came to a halt. Not anything to do with COVID, funny enough. And then obviously, a year later we were hit with what we were hit with, and
Right.
at that time I just went through this weird thing of like, what am I doing? Because I've been a creative my whole life, and I always kind of thought like I wasn't necessarily looking for a career in with creativeness, but I knew that like without it in my life, I was just grumpy. I was unfulfilled, in
Yeah.
so many ways. And it was never about making money. It was just being creative, getting that stuff out.
Nice.
So for me, when I found writing, it hit me in ways that I was never hit with any other. Like when I played guitar, I played many different instruments, but guitar mostly, and that always gave me that hit of satisfaction, of fulfillment. But writing, that filled it even more. Like it was almost like the guitar restricted me in so many ways because it was just an instrument. But writing is like I could write a person playing a guitar song, and I
Right.
can add all the feelings that I get playing guitar and
Yeah.
me playing guitar. But now I can go and do anything else. Like writing is just completely, it was like an ocean where I was before in a little room playing guitar. Now I'm in the ocean.
Hmm.
It's free, it's open.
That's really
So
cool.
for me, it was fulfilling that creative need inside, um, finding fulfillment in my life. And funny enough, like we've had a pretty crazy couple months, and I was writing all last week. Every night I was writing last week, and I haven't felt this good in a couple months. It's
Nice.
been,
Yeah.
you get busy with life and business, and the marketing and business parts of the book are incredible because it really, it's another portion of it. It really gives you a full circle control kind of thing, but getting back to the beginning of just writing and like
Yeah.
this is what I'm doing it all for. It was never to have a physical book. It was the whole thing was just the writing of it, the telling of the story.
Yeah.
I was able to in the book, I was able to put so many personal traumas and work through them. Um, and what's really funny, Herman, is I didn't actually know I was doing that. I don't know.
Right.
This is one of the cool things about writing. I didn't know until fourth draft, maybe, and it
Oh,
hit me.
really?
And I connected it with some things in my life, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's where this is coming from. Like, this is stemming from like some real life. stuff. And I think that's writing is good for that in so many ways. Like you can hit that on good, bad. You can just deal with all these different emotions. And
Hmm.
like I said, for me, that's what it does. That's what it always comes back to. It's getting that fulfillment.
Cool. I love that a lot. Now, you hadn't written at all earlier in life like that. This is something you picked up fairly recently.
Yeah. So I only started writing 2019.
Wow.
I
Wow. Okay.
had so I like
So
I like anyone I had like as a kid I have a stack of stories. Like
yeah.
I
Right.
wrote like Godzilla spin-offs and like all
Okay.
sorts of stuff like that, right? Like
Oh
when I was
yeah.
a kid,
Yeah.
I had even written for Skyrim. I had written character, like I had come up with characters and backstories for
Okay.
characters
Yeah.
that I was going to use in Skyrim, right?
Nice. Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so I knew like I liked writing, but I had never tried to write a story. Like I'd never actually tried to sit down and like anyone too, I just kind of dove in. I guess I would have been 29 years old, and I just went in. I tried. I was like, I'm just going to try to write a story without any
Yeah.
experience.
Right. Hey,
So
and I
yeah,
mean, you got to start somewhere, right?
yeah.
So, like, I guess what made you decide to what made you decide that writing was the avenue that you were going to take? Like, what sparked, I guess, the switch from music to writing, and in a way that you decided that that was going to be your outlet now.
That's actually there's actually one moment in particular I can remember, which is really strange. My wife and I were watching the movie Tolkien, the
Okay.
autobiographical kind of autobiographical kind of movie, right? Um, and it was just this weirdest thing. I don't know why. Like talking what we were talking about earlier. I used to think it was magic. I used to think George R. R. Martin was a wizard, committing magic, and I used to think Lord of the Rings was the same. And when I kind of realized from watching Tolkien that this is just a normal guy.
Right.
He was a teacher. He had like, of course, he was more in the realm of words. He was an Oxford teacher. Of course, he was.
Yeah. Right.
But what I mean is that he was just a guy. They didn't think he was going to write a fantasy book. They didn't think anything. He just sat down and wrote it. And, it was coming from a place for him, like when he was fighting the world wars and obviously in a time of the time he was living in, early 1900s Britain. It was a
Mhm.
very different time, but you can see when you're reading the book that this was just a guy working through some stuff in his life. He was using writing to just work through real life things. And I think it was just really cool when I was watching that movie that there's one scene in particular where he's looking out the window and he's watching his kids play and he just kind of picks up a pen and he writes the first lines of The Hobbit, right? And I don't know if
Yeah.
that's how it really happened, but I like to imagine that is how it really happened because that's what
Right.
I did.
Yeah.
It was just one day I was like, okay, my wife was pregnant at the time, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go start writing. Well, I was like, okay, like, yeah, I'm just gonna write. She's like, okay. She came down about 3 weeks later. I was still picking away at it. And I was like, look what I got. I had, I think, like nine or 10 chapters, right? Which is
Mhm.
like good. I was probably like 70 or 80 pages at that time. Like I got pretty far in those first little bit. I was just flowing. I had no idea what
Right.
I was doing. But
Yeah.
she
But
came and she's
hey.
like, oh, this is a real book. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna try to write a real book. She's like, oh, this I thought you were just gonna write like a story. This is a book. I was like, yeah, like well, might as well try to write a book, right?
Mhm.
Chapters and everything. So, I mean, it was just a click that I can just do this.
Right.
There's no barrier. I have a computer. I have a
Yeah.
Word doc. I've got a head filled with ideas. So
Mhm.
let's go try to slap one down. And the first one was about a bard. I felt that connection. It was hard for me to let go of the music connection. I wanted to write
Yeah.
about a character who was a musician. I think it was very much me still struggling with my own identity. Uh, like I'm not a writer, but I'm a musician, so I can write about a musician. Like it gave me that
Right.
confidence and the permission, I guess,
Of
to do
course.
it. But
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and of course, being your first book, you're writing about something that is relevant to the world you're in, right?
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that comes back. There's some popular writing advice: write what you know.
Yeah.
And like I love and hate that advice in many ways, but the write what you know, it's not just like what you've experienced. It could be
Yeah.
what you've studied, what you've been exposed to, all these different things. But it really is
Of
good
course.
advice. Try to something, because you want to ground the reader, right? And it's really hard to ground a reader if you're not grounded yourself, right?
Of course, yeah, yeah, and even if that's, I mean, doing research or figuring out a certain some part of the writing process that you don't know, like you can just because you don't know it now doesn't mean you can't ever know it, right? Like,
Yeah, no, I think it's
yeah,
there's so much to know. Like even like I love even when you're like just recently listened to the John Steinbeck's Nobel Prize speech,
okay,
and he's talking about how he still has stuff to learn.
right, yeah, yeah.
So if you
I mean,
keep that attitude, it's kind of with writing. Even if you master one genre, okay, have you ever written a mystery? Like why don't you try, like, if you look at Stephen King's body of work, right? This guy mastered horror in his first 15 books, and then was like, I'm going to write emotional Green Mile. Like, I'm just going to
right,
completely throw you a left wing, and people hated it. But he was like, no, I'm like, it was for him at that point. He's like, I
yeah,
need to grow as a writer. Like, I'm a human being. Like, I'm a guy trying to grow my craft. I'm not just here to pump out, and for me, that makes me respect him more. If he just
for
kept pumping
sure,
out horror, I mean, of course, that was a recipe that was working,
yeah,
but he took the chance, and I'm going to try to write these different things. And if you look at his body now, I think he's tried almost everything. Like,
yeah.
look, Gerald's Game, that's almost like a smut romance book. Like, he's really, really tried to push himself. I find that
Yeah,
interesting.
and I do appreciate that too. And I appreciate when, because I think there's a lot of advice, especially for indie authors, to pick a genre, stick with the genre.
Yeah,
If it's selling, then keep writing in that genre because you know that you have an audience. And I was like, yeah, I mean that's fine advice if you have one aim, and that's just to sell books. But
yeah,
if you want
that's
to grow as a writer and you want to have a body of work that you can look back on and
right.
see a breadth of work, I would personally would not feel satisfied with that. Like,
I agree.
yeah, and
I
like
think,
I was talking to Rebecca Thorne the other day,
okay,
and that interview will air in a few weeks. But she's just kind of taken off with "Can't Spell Treason Without Tea." It's a cozy fantasy, but she
excellent.
has other books that she's written in different subgenres. And I asked her that question about now is she just going to write cozy fantasy? And she's like, hell no! Like, I have other books. I want readers to pick up other
Yeah,
books, but for me, this is my uh, I wouldn't be satisfied just writing cozy fantasy.
yeah,
And yeah, and it's the same. Like, you look at Stephen King, and if he could have, like you said, he could have just kept writing horror, but he wouldn't probably not be as well known if he had,
yeah,
because I mean, he didn't branch off into some of those other
exactly.
um,
Yeah,
things that are more approachable to other people who
yeah.
are not interested in horror, right? But it definitely would have limited the scope of his work.
I think so, and I think it would have limited him as an artist. It just limited, and I think, like, I'm pretty sure you can find interviews with him talking about that. Like, listen, like, I'm human. I wanted to, like, I'm allowed to branch out and grow as an artist,
Yeah,
right? Like, and for him too, he's like for a guy that's done as well as him, like just sales and just entering into mainstream. He's got very little consideration on the literary side of, like, big awards.
yeah,
He's starting
right.
to do
For
more now, but when you really look at some of his writing and you compare it to, like, say, William Faulkner or Hemingway, or like these classic American writers, like,
mm,
he's right there. Like,
mm,
his writings, it's the genre that was, like, holding back these people. But the
yes,
more he piles on and the more he spreads out, it's like he's almost making it impossible for these, like, the critics, whoever the theys, to not consider him for these major lifetime awards when it comes, right?
yeah,
It's like, if
yeah.
you give Stephen King a Nobel Prize in literature, like, who's going to win one?
Yeah,
Because, like I
fair
said,
enough.
I'm a big fan, if you can't tell by just looking, but
Yeah,
I really do think that he pushes, like, his stuff's not just he doesn't phone it in. Like, it's very high stakes all the time, and
right.
he could make an easy decision to finish the book, he doesn't. That's why the books are so long.
Mm.
You
Right.
know,
Yes.
characters
But
are just,
yeah,
my
and
God.
I think yeah, I think I mean part of that I think because he's a pantser, right? Like he's I think
Yeah,
very well probably the like a textbook pantser as far as that's the people refer to as
yeah,
a pantser. So I wonder how much of a part of it that is that that the books end up being long,
yeah,
but it's been a long time since I read a Stephen King book, but I do from what I remember. I mean, I really enjoyed them. They were really engaging.
yeah, yeah. That's what it is. I think it's just he understands all the tools of writing, right? So,
Hmm.
um, it's just and going back to what we started with um, what I wanted to learn from the book coach was these tools. So if I
Right.
was in a point where I'm writing and I'm like, this is stinking, this is just a pile of garbage. Well, pick up some of the tools you've got. What can you use to make this more like if you know it sucks, it probably does, right? Like you're a reader, like you know what sucks and what doesn't. It's like open up your toolbox, see what you can do, see what you can get your character into trouble. What who did they find in that dark corner sitting there? Like,
Yeah, right. Yeah, and looking at why you think it sucks because I think you're right. I think intuitively you kind of know, even if you don't consciously have the words to kind of describe what's wrong in the section that you're writing. You kind of know, okay, is the character doing something that this character probably wouldn't do? Is it is the tension wrong? Is the pacing
yeah.
wrong? I think we have a more of an innate sense of some of that stuff than we realize, but we don't always realize why, right?
No,
Like
you're right, yeah.
consciously, right?
I
So
think
taking a
that
step back and
why
looking at it.
the why is what that's probably like you said that is probably actually the thing that is least important, right? Because human beings they don't always know why they're doing something, right? So
Yeah,
you could just be following along and like your POV character, if they're too informed, it almost feels unrealistic. You know what I mean? If
right.
I know exactly why I'm doing this, it's like,
Hmm.
well, you probably shouldn't, based on what I'm reading. Like, how did you
Yeah.
figure that out, right? And I think that was actually one of the cool things that, just in writing in general, that was a good realization to know, like, treat your characters as humans, not you writing the story that's what's going to happen
Hmm.
or they don't know what's going to happen, right? Like it's
Right.
hard to, I think, especially remove yourself as an author from the character
For sure.
because you are them. So like that's some weird magic in itself, isn't it, Herman?
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It is because yeah. I mean, obviously, you have multiple people that you're trying to talk all at once. In the same voice, um, or not in this. Sorry, in different their own voices, and really trying to separate your own voice out of theirs. Right.
That's right. And then
Yeah.
take those situations and make those characters react realistically, right?
Hmm.
When it might not be how you personally react.
Exactly.
And that's
Exactly. Yeah,
actually
and
it
that's
takes
the
a lot of
tricky
thought.
part.
Yeah. And like I said, if you're doing that, your story's probably going to be pretty good for the most part, no
Right.
matter who you are. But if and like you said, that's just stuff that I wasn't doing at the beginning. It was just
Yeah.
stuff that I wasn't thinking about. But you got to get messy, get in there, get full of dirt. You know.
Yeah, and some of those things you don't learn until you've written a few bad drafts, right?
Yeah,
And you
no, definitely.
figure some of that stuff out, and you get some feedback from readers, and then you start to figure out, okay, why isn't this working? Oh, it's because all my characters sound exactly the same. They're saying the same catchphrase as each other, right? Which is just
Yeah,
is not normal, right? That sort of thing.
yeah, Herman. I had so my editor when I did line edits on this first one, and
Mhm.
then copy edits, proofread. I went through the whole thing, and I basically did a developmental edit with my book coach.
Yeah.
This a memory of song basically got the whole treatment, right? But when I did line edits, my editor was like, everybody's shaking their head all the time. Like he shook his head,
Yeah.
he shook his head, he nodded, like you
Yeah.
probably need to cut about 30% of the nodded,
Mhm.
and you need to when these characters are shaking their head, think of something else for them to do.
For sure. Yeah, it's especially when you're drafting, it's easy to fall back onto those. You have a fallback. I have a fall. I have those fallbacks too. I think that's
Yeah,
totally normal, right? Yeah. I do want to let's talk a bit about a memory of song, because I want to make sure we leave enough time for us to chat about your book. Can you tell us a bit about what it's all about, and just give us, I guess, a brief overview.
yeah. It's so it's an epic fantasy. It is I've been pitching it as Braveheart meets A Song of Ice and Fire, or even better, Braveheart with ghosts and a wizard.
Hmm.
So essentially, it is the premise is that the elements have stopped working.
Oh, okay.
There's a faction of dark warlocks, who have cast magic that has ceased the elements from working. So everything's very nature based. There's heavy themes of hope, love, found family, revenge is a big one, and basically our heroes are navigating a world that is dying, um, from no rain, no wind. The fires aren't burning. It's very bleak.
Hmm.
At the same time, there's some political things happening in certain factions trying to take over other factions, because they're weak and things are in chaos, and that's what happens. And essentially, it's a clash of gray versus gray. And by the end of the first book, hopefully, I kind of set the stage for what the grand scheme of things will be, which is it's a 4 book epic fantasy. The first verse, second verse, third verse, and the final verse. Um, and it'll kind of tell. It's in the vein of, the reason I did it that way is because it's kind of like Celtic mythology.
Okay.
So in Celtic mythology, they would use songs. They would sing. I mean,
Hmm.
well, a lot of mythology, of course, but it's more, instead of it being the title of a story, it's the title of a song. So each verse kind of tells, a saga, if you would,
Right.
in this
Okay.
major event. Obviously, stakes are, we're going to save the world. If our characters fail, the world will end.
Okay.
So it's
Yeah.
very typical high action epic fantasy. It's not high fantasy in the fact that I don't have orcs and elves and those different fantasy races you're used to. The magic, I would say, is medium. It's not like low like Game of Thrones. It's higher than that. It's higher than Joe Abercrombie, but it's much lower than, say, Wheel of Time or things like that. Um, so it kind of meets you in the middle of those two. Um, and that's basically it. It's set a bit before. The reason I use Braveheart as a comparison is because it's set in those old muddy northern scenes where it's just wooden palisades, rather than big fancy castles of the Renaissance with nice pretty dresses and stuff. It's more dirty. It's more back a little bit, and lots of mysteries, lots of fun stuff.
Yeah, cool. And you talked a little bit about this already, but A Memory of Song, you have a musical background. How much of that plays into the story, or is it mostly because it's set up, like you said, like the Celtic mythology
Yeah,
song
so it actually, like,
structure?
the musical background, it really is mostly for the structure and the
Okay.
music. The system of magic is a music based magic system, in the fact that it's a word based magic system, which you might be used to from classic fantasy. Like, actually, I'm just reading Wizards of Earthsea,
Hmm.
and these words of power, right? Very much like that. Um, so it's just these words, but they don't work unless you sing them. They can't be activated unless you sing them, and you have to sing them in the exact right note with the exact right accents. So
Hmm.
it's not like you can't just go, "Rah," anybody can't just sing it. It has to be done in a certain way. Like I said,
Okay.
certain level of, but like I said, it's minor. It's not a major plot focus. The magic system is kind of, I mean, well, that being said, the magic coming back it's scary to people. They don't understand
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not. I tried to do it in that way because when you use a word-based magic system, it leaves a lot of problems in the fact that, well, why can't anybody just say these words? Um,
Yeah.
so obviously, I had to put certain restrictions. And if you're a singer, you might very well know that there's just certain people that can't hit a key.
Well,
There's
I'm
certain
not as that's me. I can't hit any key. So
That's me too, Herman. That's me too, and that's what it stems from. Is that you actually need, like, it is, you can learn and you can, but it will take work. It is like, it is a way of, you actually do have to train to use it. And if I just tried to sing this magic, I would probably fail. I would hit a high note or a low note, and it would be the wrong one. If you're tone deaf, good luck. So it was kind of just like, you need these little fail safes in your magic system, and this is not a hard magic system, in the fact that, I'm writing the second book right now, and like I'm still kind of, I mean, I have these guidelines that I'm
right.
working within, but it's not like a Brandon Sanderson book where you can flip to the back and find it laid out mathematically
Gotcha.
for you, right? But
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense.
no.
So how did you approach, I guess, building this world then? Did you was creating the world and these systems of magic and everything, was that an easy process for you, and how do you kind of approach that?
Yeah, so it wasn't an easy process. Like this was, part of the reason it's taken me so long to get to this point was because I realized as I was writing those first two kind of clunky drafts that I didn't really know a lot about our world. I knew a bunch of stuff, of course, like things I've picked up through osmosis and school and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I didn't know the timeline of our world. I didn't know Greek Empire to now. What happened? And I needed like a thorough, like I needed to understand our world if I was going to create a fantasy world with history, right?
Hmm. Okay.
Because one of the things I really wanted when you say the approach, I knew I needed 10,000 years of history. Like I wanted to write that book because that's what made Lord of the Rings, that's what made Game of Thrones, that's what made even Joe Abercrombie's work so impressive to me was the depth of the world, the depth of the
Yeah.
history. And I had this map drawn a long time ago. Before I started writing, I had the map drawn. And because the world was a big part of the inspiration for me, um, so I created almost the entire world before I started writing because I created the world without the intention of writing it as a book. I
Oh,
created
really?
it because that was the first actually creative project I was working on. I just
Okay.
thought it was really fun to create a world
Right.
and just what that entails. So at the time I was, studying world history. I started at the Greek mythology and Greek Empire of like
Hmm.
Mycenae, like way back. And I just went in a row. I went all the way through Greek. I went through Alexander the Great. I went into the Roman Empire, and I just learned about our world and all of the incredible mysteries that we have. And
Yeah.
as I was going through, I wrote down all these mysteries that interested me. And when I was crafting my own world, I took those mysteries and expanded them, turned them in, flipped them on their head, did different things, and I knew like obviously with the epic fantasy there needs to be a Mordor, there needs to be the ring, there needs to be something that's a threat to the end of the world, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, and I have no idea how I came up with the elements dying. I have no idea. I've been asked that before. I don't even remember. I remember writing it, and I don't ever remember coming up with that as the idea. But
That's funny.
somewhere along the line, I had the world created and the idea of elements failing, and
Hmm.
they melded together. And I was like, okay, how could the elements fail feasibly? Like, how
Hmm.
could this work? Obviously, I needed to connect it to magic and not science, because science, if you wanted to get scientifical, I'm sure somebody could go in and completely tear apart what I've done. Um,
Yeah.
but I've been very careful for my world within the magic system of it works by spirits rather than science. And I've given these spirits, like you said, with these magic systems, they have guidelines. So I work within these guidelines that I've given you. And in a fantasy world, that's all you need. It can't go off this end, it can't go off this end. We're working in this middle area here, right?
Yeah. Right.
So I
Okay.
knew that fantasy readers are willing to forgive you as long as you set up those guidelines and you say,
Absolutely.
these are the things. You got to believe some stuff in here, of course. But I studied all of that stuff as well. I studied what would happen if the rain stopped, how long rivers would keep flowing. And I was really
Mm.
surprised. Some rivers would keep flowing for years, just from underground aqueducts and stuff. So it was really interesting
Right.
to see. And of course, I just added everything in, what kind of food people would need. Obviously, I based it in the north, because as you're aware as a writer, you need a ticking clock. So what was the ticking
Yeah.
clock? Well, winter's coming, but we have no fire.
Mm.
So a lot of these people
Oh.
are going to die
Okay.
because the only
Yeah.
way human beings have been able to survive the cold is with fire, right?
Right. Yeah.
Otherwise, we'd still be down, further south. um, so, anyways, it was just a combination of real life history and this kind of event that I needed to shape the story. And once those two mashed together, everything, my brain just went crazy.
That's so cool. So in your story, like how long have the elements been gone for? Like, do we get introduced to it while they're dying, or as they just died? Like, where in the process are we? If that's not a spoiler.
Yeah, no, it's not actually. I start. It's about 2 weeks after when you start, and in those opening scenes, I'm giving you a bit of a flashback to,
Okay.
you're getting dreams of the characters,
Mm.
um, and you're kind of seeing a little bit of the world um, before it died, and
Okay.
that's especially for certain characters. But anyways, you're 2 weeks into it, so it's very fresh. People are very much just learning how to deal with it, and the book lasts about 9 months. So
Okay.
you've got spring to the start of winter. So it's basically the elements die right as spring is starting, and
Okay.
the
So
book
you're
ends in around right before winter.
yeah, right.
Whether
Cool.
we get them back or not, we don't know. We're gonna have to. You might freeze out.
Yeah, well, you've got yeah, cool. So you've got four books at least planned out for the series.
Yep.
What kind of time scale are the four books taking place over? Is it a continuous story, or are we seeing different chapters, I guess, of
Yeah,
time?
no, it is. Those main four books are all one continuous story, and I'm doing it in this structure that I've seen become very popular in fantasy these days, which is the novellas in between
Okay.
my main
Oh,
book.
okay. Yeah.
And these novellas I've opted to do. The first one is coming out July 30th, The Sound of Starfall, which it's all edited, ready to go. Everything, it's behind me now, just waiting for it to come out. But that goes 3,000 years in the past. And the novella timelines will be I've been using kind of like the Star Wars structure of it'll be like episode 1, 2, and 3. If you imagine it, I'm giving you history, not one generation. Like Star Wars is just one
Yeah.
generation before. This is
Yeah.
like many generations before. But there's a bunch of mysteries that happened before the main timeline that I'm trying to fill in with the novellas, and
Okay.
obviously do it in a way where it's not like I want to leave mystery in the main books. I think that's what makes Lord of the Rings and A Song of Ice and Fire and First Law so good is there's so much mystery in the world. So I'm not
Yeah.
trying to give you every answer, but what I'm trying to do is give you the other part of the story. So these two things they will work in tandem in the way that history, obviously, as you know, history is rewritten over time by the victors.
Mhm.
So if you want to go back 3,000 years in history, you're going to see some things that might not be written down.
Yeah. Right.
You might see a different version of events, right?
Yeah.
So what I wanted to play with was the juxtaposition of what you're getting in the main books, which is a version of events that you're reading that's accepted by everybody living. But then you're going back to this other timeline I'm giving you and seeing that's not really how it happened, is it? But
Right.
without giving you too much, it's actually working as a really nice mystery because I'm like, you're seeing, okay, this is what you're given. Oh, that's not really what it is. So what is it really? What is really going to
Yeah. I actually I really love that concept of just even that you're dealing with an unreliable history and kind of the present of the books, and then you're going back and kind of taking a look at maybe it looked a little different than how people now perceive it,
That's right.
because I think that gets lost in a lot of fantasy. When you start looking at people talking about canon and how people are saying, well, this never happened like this because it says it here, but it's something that happened hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago.
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
Maybe it didn't actually happen like that. Maybe your canon is wrong, right? Kind of.
That's what could happen. And like,
Yeah.
especially there was a lot of tumultuous times. There was wars. There was records completely erased. But again, this is totally from my guy George R. R. Martin. Fire and Blood is
Okay.
basically completely that. It's just
Yeah.
an unreliable history that you're seeing. Like, wait a minute, this isn't what I learned in Game of Thrones books. Like these guys
Yeah.
believe. And the best one is the Knights Commander, the Night's Watch. Jon Snow thinks he's the 999th. And then Samwise is like, or Samwell. I always get those two mixed up. Samwell is writing. He's like, I think there's only been like 300. Like, who said you're the 999? I can only find a record of like 300 of these guys. Like, why is it? Because things just get inflated. Like,
Yeah.
we've been
Right.
here much longer. We're bigger. We're better. And as history kind of loses itself, generation after generation, say 30 generations down the line, 30 generations and 300 generations could be the same. It'd be
Right.
like, we've been here a very long time. Like, they really, how long, we don't know, but it's very, very long.
Yeah.
So long that we lost record of it, right? And you're really, now in history, we can be more specific because we have archaeology.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
using, and even that is unreliable to, when they're using carbon dating and stuff to find. So I find that fascinating. And I like
Yeah.
wanted to play with that in my own world. Because
I
like I
love
said,
that.
world building is what I did this for.
Right.
The
Yeah.
creative fulfillment is what I really wanted to see, like just play with these different things. I mean, I've learned because I'm a weird nerd. like I'm sure you are with being a fantasy author, sci-fi author.
Yeah.
I'm interested in all these different things, the weirdest little facts, right? So
Right.
what better
Yes.
way than writing fantasy or science fiction than to, compile all of the weird stuff you've ever learned?
Totally. Yeah. I agree. I love that. So, like, are your novellas? So, if someone's, I guess, hearing of you for the first time, looking to pick up your books, and your novella is coming out here, it'll be here by the end of the month. Can people start at the novella, or is it best if they read the book and then like, is it best they read it in your publishing order?
Yeah, I did it in a way that you can read it either way.
Okay.
So there's no spoilers for either book in either book. So you can
Right.
start with The Sound of Starfall, and all it would do is give you a different experience.
Yeah. Okay.
There's big things that happen in both books
Mhm.
that will make the reading of either book different. So, like I said, if you read the first book and then you read the novella, you're going to get a certain impact that readers who read the novella first won't get. But if
Mm.
you read the novella first and then read the first book, again, you're going to get an impact on that first book that you
Right.
wouldn't have
Right.
had if you didn't read the novella first. So it's whatever one you want to choose. Um, it's really a closed loop system.
Hmm.
Again, I've used that. It's very like when I'm not writing to market, but that in particular thing I wrote to make sure that it is a marketing thing. I want to make sure that it is a closed loop. So like I said, you can start with the first one and go into this next one, and either way, you can just it's a round
Right.
circle. Whoever starts, whatever way, and the first book is 99 cents for ebook, and this novella will be free through my mailing list.
Oh. Okay.
So I just really wanted to make this series incredibly accessible.
Yeah.
So like I
Cool.
said, if you want to, you can start either way, but either way it's going to be easy for you, and both will feed into each other.
Right. Nice. Cool. Very cool. We are getting close to time here, but I do want to talk a little bit. I know with your first book here, you had some difficulties with Amazon.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what happened there?
Yeah. So funny enough, Herman, I still don't know like all the details.
Okay.
They were very. I've had to put it behind me, obviously, and just move forward. So I've stopped worrying about it. I'm sure I could do some more digging and find out what happened exactly, but
Yeah.
I've had to put it past me. But I can speculate on what happened. But essentially, I was my account was frozen. My account was suspended, which means that both of my books were, it was just the one. A Memory of Song was taken off of the product page, was essentially
Mm.
deleted. So then it was because I didn't have a product page to max. Goodreads also took everything down.
Wow.
So I lost everything. That was 2 weeks right before. Um,
So your
so it was
launch, yeah.
devastating.
Every author's nightmare
It,
there.
it was a
Yeah.
nightmare. And of course, I'm thinking, well, this is probably something I did because, like, what I've learned in this self publishing journey is that there's so many things that can go wrong. There's so many moving pieces at all times that you're trying to keep all these balls in the air. It is much more likely that you dropped a ball than somebody else messed up along the line.
Mm.
So I default to assuming, okay, it was probably my fault. So I was like, before I started yelling at anybody, I was like, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? But the only thing I said, I never got a straight answer from Amazon. It was due to an error in our automated system. We've lost your file and blah blah blah. Um, but essentially, what I think happened was I tried to upload the manuscript for A Memory of Song. So I had the finished PDF. I tried to upload that. Well, I did upload it. And then immediately went and uploaded the pre order for The Sound of Starfall,
Okay.
like immediately. And
Yeah.
then I realized I did something wrong on A Memory of Song. So I opened that back up and I
Oh.
changed another thing. And then I
Okay.
sent that through. So I had three things pending, right?
Okay.
One of the same book.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was what just flagged me as, like I said, I'm completely speculating. I don't know, but I think I was
Yeah.
flagged as being a bot.
Maybe.
I was trying to upload those things, but that's what I
Okay.
said. I've had that reaction. People are like, I don't know, that seems weird.
Yeah, I could see how that. I mean, because you often like, I mean, when you're browsing the internet and you do some like a few different things like that, and all of a sudden you get this like, oh, we've detected suspicious activity. Check this box.
Yeah.
I could see because I mean, as much as people like to give credit to AI and where it's at, I think it makes a lot of goofy errors like that, and I can see
Well,
that
that's what it
happen.
was.
I could see that happening.
And when I asked, I was like, could you give me any insight into this was so I don't do it again, right?
Right.
It's like I'm
Yeah.
freaking out over here. I don't know what I even did. It's like it's probably my fault. What did I do? And it was just like due to an error in our automated system, we've lost the file. Like so, they couldn't
Mm.
even tell me like. But
Jeez.
they were like, okay, you're up. Like they got me back up and running
Yeah.
within like 5 or 6 days. Still a very
Okay.
long stressful period. But then it took another like 6 days for the product page to show up.
Oh.
So that whole
Yeah.
time I was
And
dealing
you're
with Amazon
and
and
you're
then
trying to get this release up. Yeah.
yeah, and then the paperback didn't show up, and what ended up happening was my Ingram paperback went through first. So now I've got ISBN problems on the
Oh
back end. Like I don't know if you know,
no.
you're supposed to upload the KDP one first,
Mm.
attach the ISBN. Anyways, there's a bunch of back end stuff that it caused. Um, like I had to do a major pivot. Um,
Yeah.
like to when this happened, I was like, if I'm not going to be able to sell through Amazon, I'm going to have to. I'm still launching this book. Like the book's ready to go.
Hmm.
It's just I
Yeah.
can't sell it on Amazon.
Right.
So
Yeah. So what did you do once? I mean, because I know you acted pretty quick. What steps did you take once that happened?
yeah, so I tried to regain, not pull up my hair, regain, take a deep breath, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to, still get this out. So luckily enough, I've got my group of authors, my friends, the break-ins, and I just immediately went to them, like, what can I do? Spitballing some stuff. Luckily, we're all aware of many of the different platforms to sell. Like one of the discussions is Kindle, like KDP or Wide,
Yeah.
So I knew Wide was an option. So I immediately went to Ingram, uploaded the ebook, got that going. So no matter what happened, I was going to be able to sell the ebook through, Apple Music and Barnes and Noble and all these other
Right.
different platforms, which is harder to sell if, my obviously like here in North America, it's very much Amazon dominated. So
Hmm.
I knew the States was going to be my biggest market, and it was going to be harder to sell them, Barnes and Noble and Apple. As much as that is a big states market, it's a whole other thing, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, I knew again Kindle Unlimited for us young authors is a huge source of revenue that was just completely not an option if you're not through Kindle. So
Hmm.
there's obviously like there's these things that you weigh when you're trying to make the decision if you have both options. Me not
Right.
having both options anymore, I just immediately went to okay, like I said, upload the book to Ingram, and then I also wanted to. I know that selling direct is like really big,
Yeah.
especially for like bigger named authors in the indie space, making big chunks of their revenue off of that.
Yeah.
So I absolutely knew that selling direct would be the thing that could possibly save me. So I actually came up with some ways to sell ebooks direct. And just talking with the break-ins, we came up with some good ways through Book Funnel and some other things
Hmm.
um, that we thought could really work to sell direct ebooks. I
Okay.
just made a post on social media, and it was amazing that how many people were like, "Yes, I will buy that off you directly if
Right.
Amazon doesn't
Yeah.
go through." So it was really interesting to see. Like I said, my pre-orders went. I'd spent months building them, and then they went down to zero. So I was like, "Will people buy direct?" Blah blah, and then people were like, "Yes, we will, we will." And
Yeah.
then the day before, when Amazon came through, I was like, "Amazon's back," and I got a good chunk of the pre-orders back.
Nice.
Which
Oh,
is a
that's good.
testament to how incredible our community is.
Yeah.
Um, because readers these days, they really want to. I really get the feeling they want to help us as authors. They really want to not only buy the book, but like, how can I help you the most? If I'm going to
Yes.
buy your book. What is the best way to do it? And I
Yeah.
get that question a lot. I'm sure you
I
do
get it too.
too.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
really, really cool. And it just kind of, like I said, it made me feel like even if Amazon lets me down, even if any of these platforms let me down, there's still readers out there. You can still reach them. And I think it's a big testament. Like you've got this podcast here. Um, it's important to find a place where you can keep your readers, not keep them like prisoners, but you know what I mean, where you can usher your readers into a safe space where you can talk to them. So
Right.
it's not just Amazon followers. It's like for me, it's my mailing list or my website.
Hmm.
Um, like I want a space that's mine, that I
Yeah.
own, that I'm not going to kick myself out for. What I
Right.
mean, I don't have to worry that I'm going to get banned from my own website. So having that. space where you can sell your books, where you can talk to your readers. I think that to me was the biggest lesson. I already had it set up, but I didn't necessarily see the importance of it.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
you know,
Yeah, I think that is a great takeaway from that. And as you know, Amazon I think is the easy option, but it's not always necessarily the best option for us as authors because we're, to your point, now you've built an infrastructure where you've brought your readers into, so that even if Amazon decides tomorrow that they're not going to do Kindle Unlimited or whatever,
yeah,
you've still, you've built this platform of your own to that is your space that readers know where to find you and how to access you, right?
that's it. And then you can
Yeah,
send out an email to your mailing list, and you know, like there's a chance it might go to spam, right? But
yeah.
you pretty much know they're going to get it. When you put a post on social media, you're leaving that to the
Who knows?
algorithm gods to
Yeah,
hope they show these people your post that your book's out. It really gets
yeah,
it gets slippery down the line, and then especially if you happen to get banned from Amazon or you're banned from Instagram or Facebook, even for a
yeah.
couple days, it's
Hmm.
like what if you get banned right at your release?
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
then
Or
you need it.
like, and as you've seen, I mean, 2 weeks. I don't know how many pre-orders you had for your book, but I mean, I've seen authors who have hundreds of pre-orders. I mean, what happens if you're not going to get all of those back?
No,
If
yeah,
you
it was a
decide to,
small percentage. It was like
yeah,
just over 50%, which I was amazed. I thought it would be less, but it still is like, yeah, that's a good slip off, man. Like
yeah,
that's a good, especially like in the early days, every one of those readers counts. I mean, obviously every reader counts all the way through your career, but especially in those early days when you're putting that book out and you're taking that big chance and you don't know, like, will anybody even care? It's
right,
like
yeah, yeah. As a
everyone,
debut author, that makes it extra, a little extra more painful, right? Because
yeah.
you've done a lot of work to get those pre-orders that you were able to get.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
Herman, like I said, I still don't really know what the problem was. So
yeah.
obviously I'm still very cautious with everything. But what I would obviously urge to anybody, any author, just I know it's annoying, but read the T's and C's. Make sure you're following everything because I immediately went and did that and just made sure that I was like, maybe I didn't pay enough close enough attention to that the first time. Um, just really make sure that you're following these guidelines because they have so many of them that you might not think of.
Yeah,
Even when it comes down
yeah,
to keywords, I've seen many people have troubles with keywords, uh, and they can get you in some trouble. So obviously, um, it's like it's weird because there's this strange thing with that. There's these secrets in the industry, but
hmm,
I don't think they really work. Like you can, here's like you can use this keyword or that keyword, and this is better. You'll sell more books doing this. Listen, like I'm going to focus on my writing, and
hmm,
I'm going to write the best book I can, and that's going to sell me books. And
for sure.
if it doesn't, then I'm still in the same spot I was, but I haven't wasted
Yeah,
a bunch of time on, and like earlier in the conversation, we said like the writing part gives me the fulfillment.
hmm,
Um, it's not really about anything else other than just getting to write that next one. But as a creative, I want to finish a project fully before I go to the
yeah.
next one.
Fair enough.
But really, it's getting back to that writing and leaving the marketing stuff. It is what it is. I'm going to struggle with it, obviously, in different ways. I'm going to get hit with things like the Amazon thing where I completely don't know what happened, complete out of left field. Take it on the chin and move forward.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess, and that's all you can do at a certain point, right? Is move forward, and obviously, like it looks like you have done that. I do have a quick question, one other quick question I want to ask
Sure.
before we end, and that is regarding your direct sales because I know you're in Canada.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm in Canada as well, so I know that
Yeah.
shipping costs are sometimes really prohibitive for selling that. How have you approached that, and how have you found readers' willingness to order direct physical copies?
Yeah. Like I approached it. First of all, I had a store set up with simple shipping. Um, I didn't want to pay the money. It was a lot of money to have automatic shipping checkout. I have a Wix website, so I automatically got a store with that. I didn't have to pay extra. But like I said, to hook up the Shopify and everything there's many different options, but the one I was looking at was Shopify to make sure that when somebody puts their order in, it calculates the shipping automatically,
Okay.
puts it in one click, and they pay for it all right away without my intervention. Um, like I said, without paying that extra X dollars per month, I've just left out the step of the auto shipping. So people actually have to message me with their address. So
Oh,
they go on
really?
my website, they say, I want the signed hardback first edition. I've got
Okay.
directions on my website just saying, email me with your order and your address. And I email them back right away with, I calculate the shipping cost. I send them their total. I say, this is it. Here's my PayPal. And the willingness, Herman, is incredible. The
Cool.
second part of your question, I cannot
Yeah.
believe, even after all of those steps,
Yeah.
how many, if a business person heard that they have that many chances to dip off, they would lose
Hmm.
their minds. But like I said, I'm it's not necessarily about the money. I'm trying to really find good readers. So if these are, I
Yeah.
mean, these are people that obviously really want the signed book. Um,
Hmm.
so they email me. I send them email back. I send the book box off. Like the next day, I've got like nice packaging set up and everything to try to make it really presentable. And
Yeah.
I wanted to make a good experience. Not just like here's a signed book, but like I'm selling you an experience, like a book box.
Hmm.
This is a really special thing. It's a special item. I want you to feel special because you're special to me, you know. Um,
Right.
but like I said, the willingness, there was a big, I shouldn't say big, but there was a good interest the first couple weeks, and now obviously it's kind of stopped. Um, but I haven't done anything to try to market it because
Okay.
it's a lot of work for me. So like I
Right.
said, I'm kind of going through the motions at this beginning part, but um, I've had people ask me like, why did you do it that way? Like, weren't you like embarrassed or whatever? Like, I was like, honestly, no, just offer it. Let people know that you've got it as an
Hmm.
option, and whether or not it's hooked up to a professional shop where they can just do, you might surprise yourself. Like just like I wanted to, like I said, just make it as accessible as I could without breaking the bank on my part.
Right.
I've
Yeah.
actually, now that I've shipped out a few, um, I am going to be able to do like a flat rate system because I have noticed that it is kind of based on regional. So
Yeah.
you're going to have the same price. Say I think you're out west, right?
Yeah.
Canada.
Yeah.
Yes, like if I
In
ship to
BC.
Alberta or BC, it's the same price. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Kind of.
yeah, I've noticed that as well. Because I mean, your book is the same weight, right? So
That's
you
right.
you kind of know you have one book, you kind of know the size, the weight, so you can figure out pretty quickly a flat rate that'll kind of cover your bases for different areas.
That's what it is, and that's what I'm gonna
Yeah.
on the list for to do is I'm gonna get those flat rates worked out. I've kind of already started. I have like a small list, and I'm gonna set that up with my shop so it's all automatic, and then I'm gonna actually start promoting the book boxes as an option because
Okay.
right now
Cool.
like people just reached out, were like, can I get a signed copy? That's how they found them. Like I haven't posted it on
Hmm.
my website, but like it's not
Okay.
really something that I've been trying to push because just time wise, like I don't want to get.
Yeah.
Um, but and it's just like I said, it can be very time consuming.
Yeah.
You don't have a good system set up. Like I didn't have a label printer, so I had to write out all the addresses, go to the post office, do the whole thing.
Hmm.
But I always do because me personally, I bought direct very early on from a couple authors who I really like,
Yeah.
and that experience was really good to me. It really stuck with me.
Cool.
Those
Yeah.
books are books that I cherish. I've kept the packaging for some of them,
Nice.
right, with the
Cool.
wax steel, and I was like,
Right.
I always knew years ago that I wanted to do that at
Hmm.
whatever it was gonna take, like whatever it was gonna,
Right.
whether I was gonna just do it, like email me and you can get one, or set up a professional shop. Um, and I would urge if like you don't necessarily need a professional shop, right?
Hmm.
Just let people know it's there. Like literally, I just put a picture of the book, a 3D picture of the book,
Yeah.
paperback, a price, the signed price, and then I have maps on there that you can buy too, map prints,
Cool.
and
Cool.
it's just an option. And like I said, when especially when Amazon falls through, having that option where it's just there, and all it takes on your part as an author is to have some books in stock, just books from wherever you'd like, and whether it's Ingram or Amazon or any of the other like Book Vault. There's a lot of good places these days,
Hmm.
and that's really all it takes is a little bit of books in stock and a listing.
Well, Scott, I do want to let you get on with the rest of your Sunday here, and I know it's a long weekend for us in Canada, so hopefully you have some
Yeah,
fun things
Canada
planned,
Day.
but
Happy Canada Day, Herman.
yeah, happy Canada Day to you as well. But this is the greatest podcast in the multiverse, so I'd love to know how another decision may have affected another version of your life.
Oh, I like this one. Okay, so get this. Years ago, I told you I was in a band. I met my wife in a band. That all stemmed to me becoming a writer, where we're sitting right now today. But there was one moment where if I didn't make this choice, my life would be different. And what it was is, I used to work at, yeah, you have Kelsey's here in Canada. I'm sure Kelsey's a North American thing.
Yeah, I haven't seen one for a while. Are they still around?
Yeah, they're still around. They're kicking around.
Okay.
But I used to
Okay.
work at one back in the day,
Oh,
when I was a
cool.
teenager, line cook. And anyways, I made a bunch of great friends there. And I was working at another place at this time, but this particular Kelsey's was closing down. And all my old coworkers were having a party on the patio. And they're like, Scott, come out, bring your guitar. We want you to come. I was like, oh, so I was struggling with really, really bad, almost crippling anxiety at this time of my life. I had developed a social anxiety where I was like, I'd almost become a hermit. Like I wasn't,
Hmm.
I was, I was going to work and I was coming home and not really doing much, and I was becoming depressed and all that bad stuff. Um, anyways, I was not going to go because that's what depressed and anxious people do is they don't do things they really want to do, because they're scared. And I was just like, I'm not going. I'm not going. Have anything? Like, okay, no problem. If you want to come, just come on later. I sat there struggling with myself, until 8:30 in the evening, and I was like, I'm just gonna go. I'm going. Got my guitar and I went. I played guitar. We sang songs, and we all had a good time. Somebody in the bar was like, "Hey, you're really good. My band needs a guitarist.
Nice.
Why don't you come do a tryout for us?" And I was like, okay, same thing. Anxiety's kicking. I can't do that. I can't do a tryout. I'll never even make it anyways. Anyways, fast forward a couple weeks, I do the tryout, end up getting into the band. Um, a year later, I fall in love with the singer. 3 years later, we're married.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
And that was now 10 years later, I'm sitting here with you talking about my debut book.
Yeah.
And I truly think that the whole creative process would never have bloomed if I didn't join that great band. I was never sharing my art with people. It was all very to myself, and it was my
Yeah.
own.
Right.
And before I joined that band, I had never shared. And when I started sharing, it gave me the best feeling I ever had. That feeling of fulfillment we talked about earlier in the interview. Um, that's when I first really felt that. And it all comes down to that one day where I could have not gone. And if I didn't go, I don't know where I'd be right now.
Yeah, that's incredible. And those honestly, those types of stories are my favorite, where it's something where you could have easily had just said, "No, I'm just going to stay home." Because
Yeah,
how often? I mean, I do that all the time. I'm like, no, I don't feel like going out tonight.
I
But
know.
you don't. I mean, you just don't know where something from one of those events or things can lead you. 10, 15, 20
Literally
years from
change your
now,
life.
right?
It could literally
Yeah,
change your life. And, I have a beautiful daughter now that just wouldn't exist if I didn't go that day. So I just think it's
yeah,
so cool and that's why I like that question that you asked, because wow, is there ever moments like that in life, eh? And
so
even as a
definitely,
writer, you can go back and you can look at your story when you're editing. You'd be like, this moment right here, this made like, if I made a different decision right here, the rest of the story is different, you know?
absolutely,
And
absolutely,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. I love that, Scott. Thank you so much for sharing that. Can you tell our listeners where the best place to find you is?
yeah, so you can find me any social media. S Palmer Author or Scott Palmer Author. S Palmer Author on Twitter, Scott Palmer Author on Instagram. You can find my website is scottpalmerauthor.com, and that's where basically all the information on me is, all the good stuff. You
Awesome.
can find my books, links through books in there. Like you said, you're better to go through the website, the author's website, just in case they happen to be banned from Amazon. You
Right.
never know. So if
Yeah.
you're going to buy a book, I would always urge you to check out the website, because, like I said, most authors will have links to Amazon or whatever store, anyways, on their
Mhm.
website, and you never know what cool things you're going to find on that website, right?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And often we make more selling direct too than we do through Amazon or any of those platforms. So
That's right.
always good to check that out.
That's
Thank you
right.
so much, Scott. I appreciate you coming on the show and
Thank
chatting
you,
with
Herman.
me. This has been a lot of fun.
Oh, great time. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Take care. Thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed the show, like and subscribe on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Greatest Podcast in the Multiverse. As well, you can help support the show by supporting me on Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, you can get early access to the show, as well as submit your questions for my upcoming guests. I hope to see you next time. Bye now.